Welcome back, everybody. This week we are talking about making an informed purchase in the city of Hamilton, Ontario. But before we do that, if you're new to the channel, my name is Justin Little. I'm a local real estate agent here in Hamilton, Ontario, have been for 12 years, and I love making educational videos of the market. If you like what you hear, be sure to pop a like on it to get it in front of more people that can benefit from this information. As well, be sure to subscribe and join the growing community. But let's dive into it. What I wanted to try to do today was make a guide for anybody looking in Hamilton and cover a lot of topics so you can make an informed decision when you're looking to purchase a home in Hamilton, Ontario, whether it's with me or a realtor of your choosing. But I think the first thing that we need to talk about is market dynamics. The first thing that I would look at when we're talking about the market is when you're looking at comparable sales to come up with a value of the house that you're looking at purchasing. I would look at the sold date of that house. The reason being is things can change very quickly, especially in today's market where there's interest rate lowerings on the horizon. Things could shift, they could be stable, but over the last couple of years, there's been a bit of volatility just with everything that is happening in the marketplace. So when you look at the sold date of a comparable, something that sold 6 months ago might not be as comparable as something that sold just 2 weeks ago. Sometimes we even see a shift where 3 weeks to a month could even be a major difference depending on what is happening in the marketplace. Next, you need to look at what's actually on the market. So how does this home hold up to other listings out there? Does it make sense in terms of what else is available? Could you take the same budget, put it into something else, and maybe get something that will provide you better value down the road? Because you don't want to overpay in correlation with what else is available on the market. Next, I would look at the months of inventory. Now, if you followed this channel for a while, I talk about this, I feel like almost every video, but months of inventory is a gauge on exactly what is happening in the marketplace. So anything from 0 to 3 months is a seller's market, 3 to 6 is balanced, and 6+ is considered a buyer's market. So basically seller's market, if you're looking and the months of inventory in Hamilton is under 3, which at the time of making this video it is, then you are in a seller's market, meaning that you are going to run into some scenarios where there are competition. If it's in a balanced market, you might still see some competition, but more likely than not, you're going to have more choice. And then if it's a buyer's market, obviously, you're going to have a lot of choice and a lot of power when you're looking to purchase. Next, I would look at the list price to sold price ratio. So if we're looking at the prices that are out on the market, what is the average percentage of listing price that we're seeing in the market? For instance, if the house is listed for $799, is it commonly selling 1% below that? Is it selling 2%? Or are these price points commonly selling over? Is it a property that's been priced lower to try to bait attention to create multiple bids and ends up being 105% or something of the sale price? So knowing sort of that dynamic as well, the difference between the list price and the sale price is a great stat to know. And then lastly, I would consider the days on market because that does make a huge difference. If you're seeing something like 7 days on market, obviously this is a very quick moving market. If the average days on market is closer to 40 days, then that means, if you're looking and a house has been on the market for 40 days, it doesn't necessarily mean that anything is wrong with it. It just means that it's been up for the average amount of time. So you can go in there and negotiate. But if a house has been on the market way past the average days on market, then you got to start thinking, okay, why has it been listed so long? Is it the price? Is there something about the property we don't know about? Maybe we have to investigate it further. Now let's focus on a checklist if you're looking at freehold properties, because we'll break it down into two things. One is freehold, one are condos. So a freehold property can be anything from a detached house, a semi-detached. There's even some townhouses that are freehold properties. Now, these townhouses might have a slight road fee where that's paying for the maintenance of the private road, but it would technically still be considered a freehold. First thing I'd consider when purchasing a freehold property would be the location. I always think location is the most important thing. We saw in the last run of this market, people were coming in from out of town and they were buying in locations that necessarily weren't the greatest. The number one reason was they were using an agent that wasn't from Hamilton, which I will never understand. Hamilton is an incredibly pocketed city. Being born here, understanding the dynamics of it, where there could be growth, what's going to happen in certain areas, what are the negativities about certain areas, makes a massive difference. So location is huge. especially for resale. If the market does turn like it did over the last couple of years, people started not wanting to purchase properties that were in not as great locations. Prices in those areas got hit a little bit harder. So those are just things that's something to consider, like location. I'd say is the number one thing to look at when you're looking at purchasing. Number two would be deciding on the type of property you want. So as I mentioned, there's a few types of freehold properties, but decide, do you want a detached house? Do you want a semi-detached? Do you want a townhouse? Obviously, they're all different price points. You're going to pay more for a detached, less for a semi, and even less for a townhouse traditionally, but it does depend, because I have seen freehold townhomes go for more money than some semi-detached homes strictly because of age. So since we're talking about age, let's dive into that on the list. Age is something that you need to consider when you're purchasing it, is the age of the home, because that's going to determine what type of foundation it is, what type of mechanicals we might see inside the house. Could it be a heritage home on the exterior that you're actually not allowed to do anything to without permission to do it? So the age of the home can matter. It's also going to help us determine, could there possibly be asbestos in it? Could the wiring be knob and tube? Could it be aluminum? What type of, mechanicals, like I said, could be with the heating, the cooling? Is it a boiler, which we see in a lot of older homes in downtown Hamilton, versus a furnace? So age of home is definitely something to consider. This is something that I don't think you see on the MLS. You typically don't see it publicly. However, we have access to that information, so we can definitely pull it up very quickly. Now let's move on to the actual lot size of the property, because lot can matter to you. Do you want a larger yard? Do you want a larger property? Do you want to look at the width of the property, the depth of the property? Because even when we're comparing it to other properties that sold in the market, if a property has a depth of 100 and we're looking at a property that has a depth of 300, there's obviously a difference that needs to be made there, because somebody will pay more for that land. However, not in all cases will somebody pay more just because the lot is larger. We have run into situations where somebody had an end unit townhome that was a freehold, and it did have a bit of a wider property, but people didn't really see the value because it was on the corner. You really couldn't utilize most of it because you had to put the fence. It had to be set back in a certain distance from the road. Your backyard wasn't that much bigger, but you had way more lawn care and snow removal to do on the sidewalks. Number 5 on the list, I would say, would be future potential for the property. What is happening around it? What are the developments that are going on around it? Are they going to be building more of this type of property? Is there a lot of inventory coming up? Or you can look at the property in terms of, hey, do I get this property that's detached? It's a corner lot. I know we could put a legal second apartment or suite, garden suite, whatever you want to call it, in the back, coming off the other side of the street. Is that something I want to consider? Do I want it to back onto an alley so I can do that? Or do I want it to be close to a major development that'll bring up the value? For instance, in the north end of Hamilton, they're developing the waterfront. Everything new construction that's being built down there is going to be all condos and all semi-detached. So I think anybody that purchases a detached home in that area will be making a very smart decision. Number 6, you got to consider the taxes on the property. If you are not from Hamilton, Ontario, our property taxes are crazy high compared to the rest of Ontario. It's something I always hear from people coming from out of town. Why are the taxes so high? When in comparison, I'm looking at it thinking, hey, that's actually pretty low compared to what we usually see. So looking at the taxes can make a big difference as well, how much you're going to have to pay annually. It's not uncommon for a house that's 2,000 square feet on the Hamilton Mountain to have a property tax between 5,000 and 6,000. Even townhouses I've seen have property taxes between 4,000 and 5,000. And actually, I just sold a condo where the annual property taxes were about $4,600 a year. So taxes in Hamilton are high. That's something to consider, and also something to look at when you're looking at properties. Next, let's consider the square footage of the house. That's something you're going to want to look at too, because the square footage, when we talk about it, we're usually talking in terms of above grade. What's above grade? That's everything that is above ground. So a basement wouldn't be included in that. So if a house is 1,000 square feet listed on the listing, that's not including the basement. The basement could be an additional 500 to 1,000 square feet. So if you see a house, typically 2-story home listed around 1,800 square feet, it might have a basement of another 800 square feet, giving you over 2,000 square feet of living space. Also, one kind of way to look at it too, with bungalows, you can get a lot of square footage because If you have a bungalow that's 1,500 square feet, you're getting about another 1,500 in the basement. You have about 3,000 square feet of living space. So even though there's a lot of those older bungalows on the Hamilton Mountain that you see that are between 800 and 1,000 square feet, that could be an additional 1,600 to 2,000 square feet of living space total. When you combine both, you could have about 1,800 to 2,000 square feet. So square footage is something to consider, and just know that it is the above ground. We don't include what is below ground. Speaking about below ground, we have to talk about basements. What do you want out of your basement? Is a basement just storage? Do you want it to be finished space for your family? Do you want to possibly have a separate entrance so you can rent out the basement, which then we have to look at what is the height of the ceiling in the basement? Because if you're looking to put a legal unit in there, you have to have a certain height. If you're looking to put in an in-law suite, then you don't have as many regulations. Since it is an in-law, it's just family living with family. You're not going through the full legal process of separating the two units. But does that separate entrance matter? Do you want a finished basement? Do you want an unfinished basement? I have some clients that say, I don't want to pay more for a finished basement. I'd rather just buy one that's unfinished, and then we can do it the way that we want to do it. So you have to decide, what do you want out of the basement in the house that you purchase? Then we have to look at parking. What is the parking situation on this street? Is it on the driveway? Is there a garage? Because there are parts of Hamilton where it's only street parking. You don't have parking on your property, but for an annual fee, you can get a permit to park on the street overnight. Do you want something that you have two cars? You don't want to be parking tandem back and front. You want to be parking side by side. Do you need a garage? Is a carport okay? Because we have a lot of older homes that have carports, which is basically just a roof extended over the driveway with a few supports, but it's still open to all the elements, but gives you some coverage. So do you need parking? How many cars do you need parking for? If you have two cars, one car parking in the driveway may not be enough. You may run into issues with the city parking your car on the road overnight. Then let's move into the backyard. So the backyard, what do you want? You want it fully fenced. Do you have a furry friend like myself that you want to have that fence so they can run free and be crazy? Do you want a pool in your backyard? Do you want no maintenance? Do you want no grass? Do you want it to be just concrete or landscape? Do you need certain things in the backyard like a garden bed, a shed? Considering what you want out of your backyard, how you're going to use it, what you'd like to do is very important as well. And those are upgrades that when you're looking at comparable properties, you're going to want to compare, because landscaping itself can be incredibly, incredibly expensive. Lastly, I'd say then determine what sort of heating, cooling, water, sewage systems that you want in the property. When you're dealing in the city, likely you're going to be running with natural gas furnaces and air conditioning units. In older homes in downtown Hamilton, you might run into a boiler, it's radiant heating, that you then have window units for AC. And then we're also starting to see heat pumps coming now. They're starting to become quite common, which is heating and cooling unit all in one. If you go to the outskirts of Hamilton, then you got to start thinking, okay, well, I'm looking at septic now. I'm looking at a cistern. Is there a well? These are all things that you need to consider that I could go into incredible detail, but I won't, because I want to keep this video short. But that is something to consider as well. Do you want the extra maintenance of things that aren't traditional, like the furnace and AC that runs off natural gas? Now let's shift the focus over to condos, because Hamilton does have a booming condo scene. We have tons of new developments coming up. So like condos is very much that I would look at the same as a freehold, except with condos, there's a few different things. But I'd say condos, number one, like freehold, location. Location is super important. How close are you to transit? How close are you to commuter transit, the GO station? A lot of people here are commuters. Certain things like being close to the hospital can be important because it helps your resale with medical professionals. So location is definitely something to consider when you're purchasing in Hamilton, especially because it's incredibly pocketed. Then you might also want to look at what floor it's on and what view you have. So if you're on a higher floor, typically every floor you go up in a condo is about an additional $1,000. And then what view do you want? Do you want north? Do you want to be facing the water? Because if you're coming from the GTA, our water is north, it's not south. And then if you're south, you're actually looking at the escarpment, which can be beautiful in itself. But what kind of view do you want from the condo? And then the height is going to make a difference too, because that's going to obviously increase the quality of your view. However, no views are guaranteed. You never know when another condo building could shoot up and obstruct the view that you're purchasing. Then with condos, I think it's incredibly important to actually look at the layout itself. The reason I'm saying that is some condos are laid out pretty inefficiently. We see it in some of the older ones where it's like, why does my condo need a foyer that's massive, 10 by 10 space? I don't understand it. I'd rather have that be living space. The new ones are pretty functional because a lot of them are micro units. They're made for functionality. So you just want to look at the layout to make sure that the layout makes sense. Then you want to look at the square footage, much like freehold. Now, condos often get priced as a price per square foot situation. So you can compare it to other units in the building that have the same amenities, same condo fees, that sort of thing. You also want to make sure the square foot is functional for you. If it's 500 square feet, can you live in that? Do you need more square footage? Keep it in mind, the more square footage, the more you're going to pay. And you want to look at the condo fees as well. The condo fees, because some condos include everything like your heat, your hydro, your water. It's all included in cable TV. Some condos don't include any of that stuff at all, and some of them don't have amenities at all. So you have to look at what you're paying every month and does it make sense for what you're receiving in return, which you'll also get to study when you look at the reserve fund. So with a condo, usually there's a status certificate that can be ordered and it shows how the condo fees are being managed. What is the board doing? They have to do reserve fund studies every few years. It's mandatory to determine whether the funds in the reserve fund are enough to cover any major things that need to be done to the building, like roof, underground parking. If that's lagging, could there be a special assessment down the road? Meaning, could you just get hit with a big bill to help cover these improvements, or could the condo fees go up? So that's something to consider as well. Then you want to look at the age of the condo, because the age of the condo is going to affect the fees, mostly because as condos get older, they need to start doing those larger capital improvements. And that is where the fees can start to go up to cover those improvements if the right amount of money hasn't been set aside, which of course can happen because as prices go up, maybe there was a budget to do a certain job, but in 5 years, that job became more expensive just because the cost of everything went up. So older condos do tend to have higher fees, but lower purchase prices, whereas newer condos will have a higher purchase price, but a lower condo fee. One thing I'll say about condo fees, to be careful, the ones that include all the utilities, you might see them, especially the newer buildings, they're lower at first. They're around $200, $300 a month. I've seen them jump up exponentially because nobody's paying for their own water, their own heat, their own hydro. People are just running things, cranking things all the time. Utilities go up, condo fees go up. Another thing I'd look at in a condo is what is the percentage of renters versus owners? Is this a building that's mostly renters or is it one that's mostly owners? There's obviously one that's mostly owners. We find tend to have a little more care for other people in the buildings, a little more care for their unit, for the outside of the property. A good ratio that we like to look for is 60 to 70% of the building to be owner occupied. So that pretty much covers everything when it comes to buying freeholds and buying condos. I think the last piece of the puzzle, if you're looking to buy a house in Hamilton, Ontario, would be to get your pre-approval. If you do not, I don't understand why. It's like you're living in a fantasy world, just kind of thinking, oh, I can't afford this. I did a 60-second thing online. No. Talk to a broker, get your pre-approval. And this isn't because I don't want to show you a lot of houses. This is because how would you like to see a house that you love? You go to talk to your mortgage person about it and find out you can't qualify for it. Now all of a sudden you're losing out on that house and you start to have different expectations for what you can actually afford. So just having that pre-approval is key as well. If there is competitive scenarios, which we are starting to see again, knowing exactly how much you can afford could be the difference between winning or losing in competition when you're purchasing your first home or your dream home. And then lastly, I get this question all the time. Should I write a letter for submitting an offer? I've seen cases where writing the letter helps. I've seen cases where people just took more money and felt bad about it because the other people had a nice letter, but they ultimately wanted to get the most money out of the situation. My opinion on that, it never hurts. You want to write a letter, you want to submit a picture with your offer, go ahead and do it. Anyways, thanks again for tuning in. If you have any questions at all about buying a house in Hamilton, Ontario, please reach out to me. I'm an active agent in this market and I'd love to have a conversation with you to get the ball rolling. Until next week, we'll talk again.